Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Nëïgsëndöïg Cöcülës show. My name is Nëïgsëndöïg Cöcülës, the namesake for this here podcast. I've explained a little bit about age verification in episode 35, which was last week's episode, but I actually recommended y'all call it what it is: digital ID. Now, it's unfortunately coming to mainstream Linux. Canonical is going to do it with Ubuntu. System 76 is doing it with Pop because they're a hardware distributor, so I can't recommend System 76 anymore. IBM's going to do this with Fedora and likely Red Hat, though I don't think Red Hat is going to be affected. Elementary OS and their CEO, what the heck is going on with their CEO? Oh, I know what it is. A logical fallacy called appeal to pathos. Apparently she falls for it left, right, and center. And yes, even Debian is going to comply with digital ID. Not if Midnight BSD, which is a Berkeley software distribution, a different operating system that also uses a POSIX-style kernel. Midnight BSD just beat them to the punch with attestation. Just call it digital ID, because that's exactly what they're doing. Anyway, there are quite a few ways we can escape this. Now, Brian Lunduk, the sole proprietor of the Lunduk Journal. I don't agree with all of his takes, but what I do agree with is a list he put in of distributions who will not do digital ID, who have confirmed they are going to implement it, some who are unsure about it. CashOS, I think. Oh, what else? CashOS, I know, is not going to do it for now anyway. MX Linux is not doing it, and one other one I forgot. Doesn't matter. And of course, the stuff they've already implemented, mainly Midnight BSD right now. But I'm going to focus on the ones that will not be doing digital ID. These will all be systemd free distributions with their own flavor of difficulty for Linux if you are interested. This is going to be a doozy. Let's hold our horses right here for a second, because I have one of what will be 4 fun facts for y'all, I believe. The first one is actually an observation of mine. When I used CashOS, which I no longer use now, I am using the first one on this list, Systemd took a lot of resources just for running i3. Just for running i3. It is just that silly beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just why? It makes no sense. Well, what I use now, by contrast, actually doesn't take as many resources. And as of right now, I'm running on 13% of the RAM and pretty much less than 2% of my CPU. It's literally that simple, at least for me, with the way I set things up. But yeah, that's essentially how that works, unfortunately. Thanks, Systemd, for ruining my system! Now, for the first of these operating systems, the one that I now use, Artix Linux. Now, what is Artix? Take Arch, strip Systemd out, merge Arch OpenRC and Manjaro OpenRC in 2017, you get this birth of Artix. Arch OpenRC and Manjaro OpenRC are projects that strip Systemd out of Arch or Manjaro and instead replace those with OpenRC and basically anything else that is required to even run something with OpenRC. Well, Artix is basically the merging of those two projects in particular from 2017. And it does the same thing that Arch and Manjaro OpenRC projects did. Take Arch, strip the bloat and spyware that Systemd is. The repositories for Artix are designed to be without Systemd, at least in terms of hard dependencies. You don't need any hard dependencies for Systemd at all. Now, the AUR is definitely supported But just like the AOR on Arch or any other Arch base, which, by the way, there are some not implementing it, like Endeavor or CachyOS, or even Garud Linux, those are not going to be supported. The AUR packages, not officially anyway, though there are some ways to get around that with the Andotai or the chaotic EURs, of which I use both. Now, those who don't like GNOME because of how dirty they are with their tactics, we don't have GNOME anymore due to a hard system D dependency. This is a minimal and almost suckless distribution when you use the base, as in doing things the Arctic's way. I didn't do the Arctic's way and instead used a desktop environment, installed it from the desktop, updated, then added an i3, and of course, my dot files thereof. But there are quite a few different options for desktop environments. Yes, Plasma is also included, so if you wanted to use Plasma, that's fine by me. Now, there are stable ISOs that are released biannually. In other words, pretty much twice a year. The devs here do recommend a weekly ISO, and there's a fallback in the case of Antix Linux. See what I did there? No? Okay, I'll move on. The first release of this distribution back in 2017 came with a command line installation with OpenRC. OpenRC was the only thing that was utilized back then. The second release was LXQt with the Calamares installer, and it had to be offline. Ugh. The third one that came out was actually for the i3 window manager, of which I'm still using i3. Though I am willing to try things like Miracle WM, which uses Mir, and that's Wayland, or something else entirely. Not entirely sure of that. Doesn't matter. There were more releases afterwards, and of course, with the addition of the 3 other init systems, I will go through those quickly again: dinit, runit, and S6. If you're a systemd refugee, though, OpenRC and dinit are recommended to be used, since they are more compatible with systemd than you think. Nowadays, since 2026, I think early 2026, Arctic uses Xlibre and Pipewire for their defaults, replacing Xorg and Pulse Audio respectively. Now, what is Xlibre? Xlibre is a fork of the Xorg graphics display server, and it basically tries to fix and modernize the old legacy Xorg code. In Pipewire, it used to be called Pulse Video, but it's turned into a sound and video server that is actually pretty nice. And it just works if you know what you're doing with it. I mean, it already just works as is, so keep that in mind. A lot of people hate Xlibre, obviously for political reasons. I am a proud Xlibre user, and nothing's gonna get me out of Xlibre unless I really did want to try something like Miracle WM or Sway. Or probably something like, what is it, BWL or something like that? I forgot. There's a BSPWM like that I wanted to use that isn't River. I probably wanted to try that anyway and see how well that worked. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. This is what Arctic does nowadays, at least for the stuff that uses Xlibre by default. The second fun fact for y'all is that before May of 2011, all the operating systems ended up using sys5 init. Sysv, sys5, it doesn't matter what you call it. I personally don't mind either way, and I'll still know what you're talking about. The first distribution to take the leap and really shove systemd down people's throats was Red Hat's Fedora Linux with version 15. This was before IBM bought Red Hat and basically compromised it with IBM moles. Ugh. The second distribution we will be covering today is the Spanish-developed general-purpose OS known as Void. Now, their packaging format is really unique. It is a mix between binary, which is what most distributions go for, and or source-based packaging. Now, why source-based? You can thank Gen 2 for that. Yeah, Gen 2 is definitely very interesting with their package manager. Boy, that's something else. Now, this is something that utilizes Rennet as the init system, and I don't think it'll support anything else because of the way this is made. This does in fact support both Musel and the GNU toolchains natively, and software patches are made when necessary to support either or. I'd highly recommend the GNU toolchain and not the Rust version that's being pushed by Canonical. Canonical, you guys are something else. Anyway, the Void developers will go ahead and work even with the upstream developers of the applications that are made to improve the packages for Void. Now, there is a base ISO. Base means command line and TTY and all that. You know, the Void way or the Arch way. Or you can use an ISO with XFCE. But if you want to install the stuff that's for XFCE, you have to do it offline. Offline installation would be required. Otherwise, you can do pretty much anything else. Now, it is confirmed that they have no plans on implementing digital ID at this time on Reddit. And yet Reddit is doing digital ID. Not good, guys. You might want to use something else. Now, I might actually want to do a Void install sometime, though I tried that in the past. It didn't work out. Maybe I should just do a Void installation with Xvice or anything else. We'll see what happens. The next fun fact that I have, without-systemd.org is what informs people about the shortcomings of systemd. This helped me to choose a distro designed for the purposes of gobbling up as little resources as possible. This I wanted to do for quite some time, and thankfully, I got to do that with Arctic's OpenRC. I could use DNet and remove the silly DBus stuff and whatever. There's just a lot of stuff like machine ID. Arctic devs, I would highly recommend removing that because that was what Dev1 did. Because Dev1, they knew that apparently there was something pretty odd about machine ID when it was first implemented with DBus. Very, very interesting. The third distribution I will be covering is what was actually forked from MCC Interim back in 1991. Now, this is something called Slackware. It's a made in the USA independent Linux operating system. Its purpose is for ease of use and stability, but it did start as MCC Interim back in 1991. This was the first ever version of Linus's Unix. Linus? Which Linus? Linus Torvalds. A lot of people know about him. Yeah, the guy's a troll sometimes. But that doesn't matter. MCC Interim would be forked by Patrick Volkerding to create Slackware. And he's actually said the following here, and I'm going to read it word for word, quoting him saying, "I'll weigh in a little bit here, I guess. At this point, I'd rather not implement something like this and don't see the point of the legislation as written, other than, more than likely, get a foot in the door." To break away from that for a second, he's talking about the recent legislation in California and Brazil, which basically require either attestation or full-on digital ID. Actually, excuse me, it's just digital ID. They've been doing this for a while now. Continuing. But my code is speech. I doubt these laws would survive a challenge, and it's pretty clearly government-compelled speech. Any lawyers looking for a test case? That bit was honestly funny. Now, a lot of people who visit the Slackware website, they don't even realize that Slackware itself is used for the server, with pretty low specs. And yet, Slackware runs the server just fine. And of course, this is the server that is used for the purposes of hosting all the Slackware stuff. This I find a bit humorous, I will say that. Now, you have old school text menus and prompts, including software categories you can install yourself during first setup. Now, of course, as in way back in the day, if you really love it, sys5 init is utilized as the init software of choice. Now, I will mention about Debian. Until I think Debian Jesse was the first version of Debian to use systemd. Otherwise, it was sys5 init. Now, this could have been really good for many people, and I actually do want to try this on a VM. Not using KDE. Goodness gracious. Just probably provide something else. I'd be happy to try that. What? Cinnamon would be pretty good. I wonder if that section was a blunder. I'll keep it in. Anyway, next fun fact. Systemd Resolve D was, some time back, considered to be a broken mess, which led to a very fancy attack called DNS poisoning. I'm gonna search it up right now as we speak. And it is pretty bad. It's a type of DNS faking where you basically enter false information into a DNS cache so that the queries return a bad response and users are directed to the wrong websites. But yeah, DNS spoofing, you definitely want to prevent that. But systemd apparently didn't do this for a while. This also allowed for attackers to hack machines via bad DNS responses. But we're gonna see if they were fixed. I don't know if they were. Alrighty, the fourth and final distribution we'll be covering is something from Spain again, but this is a Debian-based distribution. But wait, it's not just Debian-based. It's based upon a little something called Devuan. Let's cover Devuan real quick before we get into this one. Devuan is taking Debian, stripping systemd, and basically slapping sys5 init on it, just like back in the day. I think it was actually right around 2014 when Debian decided to start using systemd. Well, Devuan has another fork. A Spanish-made distribution called Vendaval Wolf. I've never heard of this before this year, 2025. I don't know when. But it utilizes OpenRC instead as its PID1. They also support sys5 or runit if you really wanted to use those. Here we are using Xlibre for all the ISOs with the exception of one, which apparently is hopefully getting fixed. And it's just like Debian. If you want a stable environment, very good for working conditions, and Vendaval Wolf might actually be a good idea. Though they actually use things like LibreWolf and KeePassXC, among others, to keep people safe from surveillance. And integrated AI. If you wanted to use AI, just use the local stuff and install locally and separately. That's what I did with Artix. Just saying. Now, we have the current version based upon Devuan 6, its codename being Excalibur, based upon Debian 13 codename Trixie. Now, since this is Devuan based, we won't be having machine ID, which is apparently used to spy on people, which, by the way, was implemented in Dbus. And they're also going to go ahead and remove the digital ID stuff that Debian's going to do, but since it's going to be Devuan, they're just going to take Devuan and make the changes they do to it themselves. Final fun fact for this episode, there was actually a fork of systemd that was made called uselessd, which was designed at the time as a saner System D base. So nowadays we have things like, well, let's be real, liberated System D, which is not liberated at all, but rather still spying. It's just not spying on you with that little file for your date of birth, user DB, whatever the flip it is. Now, those of us who actually don't like System D, we are not Sys 5 purists. We do understand the need for a new init system. System D ain't in the 21st century, but it's been adopted. But System D didn't win. What they did was cheat their way through the system. That's why I'm not a System D fan anymore after reading about it. There are things like OpenRC, Runit, S6, DNet, Sys5, and many more the like that exist. Use those instead. Ugh. Well, that disappointment actually ends this episode right here. Each and every episode releases every Wednesday afternoon if there are no scheduling conflicts at 4 p.m. Pacific Time. You can listen to this podcast on YouTube, Wavelake, or any other Podcast 2.0 player, including AntennaPod, Fountain, or Podverse. Wait, you don't have a Podcast 2.0 player that supports this podcast? YouTube side, just take a look at the description below. The RSS feed is there. Put it into your 1.0 player like Spotify or even Apple Podcasts if you want. I don't care. You'll be able to listen to this podcast right then and there without any issues. You'll also get the bonus episodes from Wavelake, by the way, with the RSS feed, so that'll be something to consider. But that said, I am out of time for today's episode. Thank you, and good night. Oh, you thought this episode was over? Well, I actually want to cover a little something really quickly because you may have noticed I've been inactive as of late. That's because of the fact that I never really got the chance to upload anything at the undisclosed location. I only uploaded the undisclosed location now, and there are times where I'm going to be inactive because of my current living conditions at the time. So, yeah, I hope you are very understanding about this because I just am not going to be as active as I used to. I used to be active every single week on YouTube, every single week for 4 years straight on Cöcülës Nation. That's my main channel, by the way, for those that are unaware. And now, because of the stuff that's been happening as of late, I just couldn't do squat anymore. I've been essentially kneecapped. Yeah, that's just because of the conditions I'm in right now, and I'm hopefully getting that fixed by the time this episode is released. And probably after this episode is released, things have already gone to a more stable working environment for me, I guess. Autism kind of stinks.